No war has ever been successfully accomplished simply by bombing.
A lot of people right now are hearing bits and pieces about what's happening in the United States and Iran, but they don't actually understand what's happening, why it's happening, and what it could mean. When things move fast, confusion spreads, narratives get mixed up, and people are left trying to figure out what's real and what the heck is going on. So today we are slowing it all down. I'm joined today by Colonel Don Crumlin, a retired Air Force base commander. Colonel Don Crumlin has many military awards. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be of service. I had a top secret security clearance for my entire military career, and my Air War College thesis paper was on war in the Middle East. So I'm very knowledgeable about the subtleties, nuances, and details of how each side looks at their different situations. And it's very troubling with regard to the fact that all of that is extremely complicated to those that live there. And yet, for those on the outside, particularly this current administration, seems to look at it as a C-spot run simplicity model, and it's completely the total opposite of that. Very, very complex. There are multicultural designations and groups involved. There's obviously a strong religious sect, but there's also a strong sect that is not religious, but are rather standard, regular, if you can say that, Iranian people that are not happy at all with anything that the Ayatollahs have been doing and are totally focused on what the standard before the USA got involved and installed the Shah of Iran, and they had a democratically elected leader there. The people rejected the Shah. He got overturned. The Ayatollah came in as the religious supreme leader, and they got organized with both a powerful religious leadership as well as a functional subservient government leadership. And now that all's been fractured not only into the two different sects, but also many different subunits within each side of that. Part of the problem with that region, in terms of it ever reaching a quote-unquote peaceful solution, is that the foundational doctrine of each side says that the other side does not have a right to exist. So when your hatred, your disapproval, whatever you want to call it, of the other side is that ingrained, deep, and passionate, and has been going on for thousands of years, it's absolutely ridiculous to think you can drop a couple of bombs and expect somebody to say, I surrender. It's the passion, the frame of reference of the internal wiring of the people in that region is such that if they don't have anything but stones to throw at tanks, they will still throw stones at tanks, as far as how deep the level of their passion in defending their territory is concerned.
If you would you go back for a second for us
Sure.
newbies who really know the word Middle East and not much more than that? And you talk about sides. Can you briefly, before we even begin?
By sides, I meant the Israelis and the Islamic people that are the two foundational sides in terms of this forever war that has gone on for centuries. So since it was Israeli that was the spearhead of coordinating this attack in initiating it, they are in close proximity and surrounded by mostly Arab nations all around.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the controversy that got all stirred up during the Second World War with regard to how Israel came about. Yes, all of the region, the geographic region, the country that And you see this if you watch carefully in the very first Indiana Jones movie, The Raiders of the Lost Ark. When the plane is flying over, they have subdued in the background the map of that region. You see that the area that is now called Israel was once called Palestine.
Mm-hmm. And Israel's very young.
Yes, so obviously the Jewish population in that region has been there forever, but Israel itself didn't
Right.
come about until the mid 40s.
It's a
What
sovereign nation,
happened?
is what you're talking about.
Yes, as a sovereign nation. What happened was what was once Palestine, because of the different organizational structure, the Arab world and the Islamic world are organized in terms of tribal units, and they're comfortable with that type of organization. The Israeli side is organized in the more traditionally governmental hierarchy that we in the West are used to seeing. Coming out of World War II and the United Nations trying to determine who should have sovereign control over that region of the country, because the Israelis were organized in a more traditional and recognizable structure, and the Arab Islamic side had all of these splinters of different tribals. They all had the same passion in terms of what direction they wanted to go in, but in terms of a traditional governmental organization that could say that they represented all of the people there,
Mm-hmm.
it was more like a whole bunch of tribal chiefs competing for the same thing. Everybody wasn't organized under one leader.
From a Western view, it maybe wasn't, it didn't look like a Western government organization. Uh,
Correct.
and so
It, it,
that's,
it's so the United Nations in trying to figure out what was going on and who should have ultimate control, they went with the model, the governmental model that they were comfortable with, in terms of, in their eye, these guys are more organized and more functionally able to interface with the rest of the nations of the world in that type of structure. The United Nations was in charge of determining who would actually get all of the contested land that we today know as Israel, but way back then was known as Palestine. Clearly, one side was feeling like they were slighted and not given their due with regard to the respect and backing of the United Nations. It's very difficult for people in the West to understand the way that Iran is specifically organized, in that there's a very strong religious sect, but that's not entirely what Iran is all about. They also have a very significant side of, for lack of a better term, because there are so many different nuances throughout the population,
mm-hmm.
of regular people that are not ingrained in the religious fervor that we would normally associate with them. And they are very happy to see the Ayatollah and that system go away.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get back to, before things got all messed up with the Shah and all of that sort of stuff, Iran had a more traditionally organized system where democracy was becoming more, in burqas and the whole concealing, the whole conservative, Islamic conservative wardrobe for women and their diminished ability to have independent freedoms and etc., was developing to more of a Western model.
Absolutely. I've seen videos where they show the hairstyles over the decades.
The hairstyles, the dressing, the clothing and everything was looking much more like 60s, 70s America,
mm-hmm.
versus what it is now. And that's part of the sect that is rooting for the religious zealots to be pushed out. So they have an internal conflict,
yeah,
of wanting to see a surgical diminishing of the power of the Ayatollah structure that is heavily influencing things, versus the traditional government structure, which is still there, still exists. You realize they have a president of Iran, as well as the supreme leader, being the Ayatollah structure that oversees that. A similar analogy would be the way that, obviously very different, but for you to understand how that works, you have the monarchy in England, where you have the king and
Mhm.
the princes and so forth, and the princesses and the dukes and all of that. But the actual parliament and the prime minister are actually running the government. So they have a similar but different structure within Iran, and that's what makes it really confusing and really complex. There's a modern history, a modern recent history that affects what's happening right now.
Right.
We have an administration where the um, leader, the current president, had a very, you're very familiar with this, he had a very hostile and, let's face it, racist uh,
Mhm.
view of the Obama administration,
Mhm. Absolutely.
which had already negotiated a significant treaty with the Iranian government. They got rid of a significant, huge amount of their military grade nuclear
Right. I
material,
remember. Yes.
and they had committed to not restocking it.
Hmm.
They poured cement into their storage and centrifuge facilities that would have been a big part of creating a viable military grade nuclear thing. And they committed to a schedule of reporting to the International Nuclear Oversight Commission. I forget their exact name, but that's what their job is. That's
Right.
what they're, so that we could keep track and be fully aware of, and inspectors would come in on a periodic basis and take a look and say yes they are or they aren't in compliance, and that would be the thing. Well, without ever reading the details, apparently,
Hmm.
the current president decided that he didn't like the deal. He kept claiming it was a bad deal. It wasn't a perfect deal, but it was hugely close to certainly something that we could live with
There was
in
oversight.
terms
There was oversight.
of, there was oversight, there was the destruction of uh, the material that potentially could upgrade going forward.
Mhm.
All of the foundational structures that you would want in creating a safe environment for the rest of us to interface in the world, to interface with Iran
You feel
as
secure,
a
like
non
it's
as a non-nuclear threat.
right.
All of those things were in place, and if there was no way for them to develop a that process without the oversight, the independent
Mhm.
oversight, being able to warn everybody about that if
Right.
they tried to change course. He killed that deal because he didn't like it, only because it was done by Obama. He wanted credit for he claimed he could do a better deal. He never did. He never did another deal. He never did. Basically, they were left to do whatever they wanted to do on their own because he totally wiped out the treaty, so there was no deal. And the powers that be could develop whatever they wanted, and certainly based on the distrust and hostility that exists in that region and has forever, they slowly started to build, even though they were still, there was no imminent threat, just as some of the people that have left the administration recently have said,
Have admitted. Right.
because it admitted because of their close proximity to the situation and disagreement with the president's short-sighted assessment of the situation. And actually, he really did not have a true understanding or assessment of the situation. All he was doing was going along with what Netanyahu, who clearly has
A biased opinion.
a very yeah, I'm trying to say it politely,
I'm not.
he has a very different agenda,
Right. Right.
and his agenda is passionately based on what the Israeli position is with regard to the entire Arab and Muslim world.
Trump made it less safe for the area and for
Yes,
the world.
in a word, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, the Obama team had a great deal of experts that were brought in, and everything was legitimately negotiated, unlike this administration claims they negotiate when they have had zero communication at all with the leadership in the region. So the treaty that was established, signed off on by both sides, and was in place and moving forward was legitimately and factually agreed to, was in place and was being adhered to. They were released from the constraints and the obligations and the commitments of the original deal. They were free to do whatever the heck they wanted to do. There was the beginnings of the start of a buildup of their processes, but they were still many moons away from being able to have something that could be considered as even the viable foundation of the building blocks to create a weapons grade nuclear device.
Was that buildup not because of the fact that there was no deal, though?
Yes, the buildup was because of the fact that he had killed the deal, so they didn't
Right.
have any constraints anymore. Yeah.
So, not to be blunt, but you know how I am. He caused he caused this.
Some people would say that. He was totally going off of just supporting Netanyahu's position, which is, from a balanced perspective, it's unreasonable because he is looking at, the lens that he's looking at things through is totally influenced by the passion of what they are brought up with in the Israeli society, that the Muslims do not have a right to exist. That is the same thing that the Muslims look at the Israeli side with. That's the same lens that they look, only from the other side. They say that the Israelis don't have a right to exist. And that's why we've had these zillion-year wars between the two factions.
Do you personally believe that it's a case of Donald Trump just literally not comprehending the understanding that had been established in the Obama administration, or maybe not carrying it away here or there and just wanting it gone, or what's his bottom line?
I think it's all of the above. Certainly the people that worked in his first administration said it was very frustrating to deal with him. He did not understand complex concepts and ideas and formats and so forth. He doesn't understand the military despite his claims. He has no idea what the structure and the commitment is, and the integrity and the honesty that goes on in the cultural structure of a military organization. He clearly, even though he went to a military boarding school, just like everything else, he gamed the system in order to make it out of there, versus actually immersing himself in
the culture and understanding and learning and whatnot.
Learning the process, going by the rules, etc.
Now, maybe we can get into some of the here and now.
From everything that I've researched and observed, apparently this administration consulted people that had no background in the extensive details of the history and organization of the dual entities involved. And he went totally based on his own personal biases, the influence from his inner circle of people that had zero military and zero true deep understanding of how things work in that part of the world.
Historical understanding, right, absolutely.
Right.
Cultural understanding.
Totally went just as a Batman and Robin tag along with what Netanyahu, who has a specific axe to grind based on what I described. Based on what I described in terms of the conflicting agendas between the Israelis and the Muslims.
So it might be said that he's blindly following Netanyahu without a deep, intensive knowledge of probably much.
The simple answer to that is yes. If you follow the original Star Trek series, when it went from the Wrath of Khan to etc., Khan was a narcissist that had an overinflated assessment and evaluation of his self worth and intellectual acumen. He thought he's the smartest person on in the galaxy,
Thought it's
basically,
all that.
in
How about
in
that?
that world. He thought he was all that.
Yeah. Okay.
And but his problem was he had two-dimensional thinking, and by that we mean that he had an immediate and a tactical versus just a little beyond immediate, but did not have a strategic vision in terms of, I want to do this. Okay, well, what happens after I do that? I
Hmm.
don't care. I want to do this.
Hmm.
And then there's, well, what happens after that, and what does that world trigger to happen here, there, and beyond?
Sounds like chess almost. You have to kind of know what's next and
It's,
next and
yes, in
next.
terms of like a three-dimensional layering
Mhm.
thing. There was no planning for what the repercussions would be of all of the American citizens that are in all of the neighboring foreign countries that are now going to be compromised in terms of how do you get out of there in order to keep them safe. They talk about all this rhetoric about keeping America safe and keeping people safe, but they didn't plan
They
for
didn't
how to
warn them,
keep.
did they?
They didn't warn them. They didn't plan for a safe exit facilitated by the government. For one thing, a lot of those people that had experience, knowledge, background, legacy, information on all of those things were fired during the Doge purge.
Right. So of course they weren't consulted.
So
They weren't there.
not only that, they got rid of all of the corporate knowledge that would have an understanding of the subtleties and nuances in the region in
Historically and
order to
culturally. Right, right. Oh
to
wow.
understand the culture and the machinations of the way that the organizational physical structure works as well. The UK moved in and used their own military aircraft to evacuate their people out of there, whereas the Trump administration, because they had no corporate knowledge of how to handle that type of a situation, said, you're on your own, figure out a way to get out of there commercially.
I heard
Good
they gave
luck.
like a line to call that was just like a recording line saying basically good luck there.
All
I mean,
Yes, all of the support structure had been fired during Doge. This president did not, and not only that. Unfortunately, it looks like this president and Secretary of Defense seem to have learned all of their military knowledge from watching a couple of John Wayne movies, and that's not the way the real world works at all.
they're experts in the field who dedicate their entire life to
That's correct.
kind of historical and cultural knowledge and
And in my 28 years in uniform, I went to many, many schools that developmentally taught commanders, here's what the history of the world is with regard to the military, here's what worked recently, here's what's going on currently, here's what we
very
project to the future. It's a very complex thing. There are even specific schools. I went to war planning school. I went to several different layers of commander schools where you learn all of this. And not only that, just as a regular line officer, as you come up through the ranks, you have squadron officer school, air command and staff school, air war college. Like I said, my air war college thesis paper was on war in the Middle East. So I have a deep, deep knowledge of what's going on there. I went to other service schools. There's the Marine Corps maritime officer development schools. I went to those schools. Navy Staff College. I went to Navy Staff College. So so I know how to look at things from not just historically, here's what happened here, here's what we project will happen there, but I looked at it through the lens of the Navy, the lens of the Marine Corps, the lens of the Air Force. And I've spent time on Army bases too. There was a time when I was a young lieutenant where I worked in what they call TriTac, which was nicknamed Purple Suit because it was all four services: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And you get a totally different perspective of how they do business, how they concept the battlefield, and the forward application of their weapon systems that are specific to their duties.
Well, you're definitely
And
starting to give me a very, very strong idea of why it's a lot of people would like to have a president who has had extensive military experience. Um,
it's yes,
mm,
it's not something that you can jump into and treat like a business or a
Absolutely not.
corporate world view of things.
Right.
Militarily, there's a term called the fog and friction of war, and no matter how great a plan you have, stuff happens that are total surprises
Mm-hmm.
once the munitions start flying around
Hmm.
and the people start responding. Some
Right.
people are learners and they learn quickly on the fly how to counter what one side or the other is doing. There's a saying that I learned in Air Command and Staff College. It said, in love and war, the advantage goes to the side that understands the key issues with the greatest clarity.
Terrifying.
He's making knee-jerk reactions under extreme stress. How many of us have made good decisions under that scenario?
Especially with no
The
history,
re-
no background, no education, and not having people question him, and not having advisors who have a depth of knowledge and culture behind them.
exactly. So he removed the sanctions against Iran because of the panic of the Strait of Hormuz being compromised by the war. He released the sanctions on Iran so that they could sell oil and distribute it and try to appease them, but not really to appease them. He wants to flood the oil market so that the oil prices don't go ridiculously high, because he knows that is a really simple and basic and visible indicator of what a rotten job he's doing in this
Right.
area. And he did the same thing for Russia. Russia had all these sanctions on them, and
Took them
because
away,
they're making
didn't he?
war with Ukraine, he should have increased the number of, but no, he took away all of the sanctions against Russia. So now Russia is getting super wealthy by selling all their oil, because they have lots of natural oil resources in their country under their control. They're getting rich. Not only that, Putin, who's played him like a Stradivarius, who Trump thinks is a friend, has never been an ally to the United States. I have no idea how the Republicans got bamboozled into thinking that they could make a deal or have some kind of relationship with Russia. Russia is feeding Iran with intel that they know about the US. So it's compromising and putting in further danger
Right.
our soldiers, weapon systems, ships, planes, etc. They are sharing the knowledge of, here's how you counter American military hardware.
So can I just clarify for a minute? Is this what you're saying? Basically, that we have taken away the sanctions for Russia so they can help Iran, who we are at war with now, essentially, and so that Trump can look good to maybe we the people, because the oil prices may or may not spike as they're supposed to because of closing of the strait, and basically he's giving a gift to the people we're supposed to be fighting to make himself look good. Am I getting
It,
that right?
that is a correct and accurate assessment of what I'm describing. Yes.
Okay. Just I want to make sure I'm
Well, he's trying to flood the international scene with more oil so that the prices don't scream out of control the way that they're headed, because of the total miscalculation and mismanagement of the war.
right.
To finish the point I was making earlier about him having only two-dimensional thinking,
Right. This is it.
is that there's no strategic
Right.
vision. What happens after we do this? Once we do
Right.
this,
Right.
whether we achieve our objective or not, there's still a what comes next, and what comes after what comes after immediately next. What's in the long term? What happens
If
next?
we have Russia giving information to Iran, not having their sanctions, and then we have our country deciding we're just going to send in your children, your boys and girls, isn't that endangering them terribly?
It is putting our own soldiers in serious harm's way that will spike up the casualties that
Mhm.
we experience.
And all this is to keep him popular with the
This
people?
is, well, yes, because he has to avoid what he didn't plan on, which is the falling off a cliff
Right.
of the oil prices spiking through
And
the
plan
stratosphere.
for the future.
He never had a future plan. So
Right.
he's stress reacting to the horror of what's going on now, as well as not telling the truth of what's going on now. In the Art of War by Sun Tzu, which is standard reading for all military leaders, and was done by this very successful Chinese warlord thousands of years ago, written by him. All of these foundational principles in people and weapon system capabilities in conflict with each other are still viable to this day. One of his foundational platforms is know your enemy better than you know yourself. In the military, we talk about things that are called centers of gravity. And the problem with going after centers of gravity, which is basically what are the key things in the opponent's geography, capability, military, and civilian structure that are key elements that we must address as we progress with a military campaign in order to achieve our objectives. Commanders in, for example, the Vietnam War did not learn very well at all what that the centers of gravity for the opponent are very different from what happens if you try to impose what we consider to
Hmm.
be centers of gravity
Hmm.
on the opponent. For a person to get up there and say, "Well, we bombed their this structure and that structure and this capability and that capability. We bombed their navy, we bombed their air force, we bombed all this." First of all, no war has ever been successfully accomplished simply by bombing.
So bombing somebody into submission is not
Yes,
really a thing.
that's never been a
Not a
successful
thing. Okay.
war. No conflict or war campaign has ever successfully done that. That's number one.
Kind of big.
Number two, are you really addressing what they consider to be their centers of gravity? And by going after what this administration considers to be their center of gravity, they have now splintered off into what happens with insects when you walk in the room and turn on the lights and everybody scatters all over the place. So now, instead of having regions that are easy to inspect and see that they are in compliance with the things that were identified and negotiated and so forth in the original deal, now, especially with the capability of drone structure, all of these things are scattered all over the place. There are now a zillion different pockets of lone wolf McQuade centers to basically hit and run, kind of like the settlers versus the British back in the Revolutionary War, where the British all wore red and marched in a straight line, and the settlers could fire from the trees, the rocks, and
Right.
everywhere.
I almost brought up that example, but it's so simplistic, and I know nothing about war games, and whatnot. But
That's the concept. So
mm,
the current administration is now going after Iran as if they're all wearing red and marching in a straight line, versus now they're behind the rocks, the trees,
right.
and
Sounds
everywhere.
little Vietnam,
And
really. I mean, if you
little,
think about it,
yes,
I hate to say it.
there are little energy cells that are operating independently, but eventually they recognize that Israel and the U.S. are the enemy, and they're attacking from here, there, and everywhere. And there's no way for this administration to get up in front of a podium and say, well, we're accomplishing this, we're accomplishing that, we're making progress in this campaign.
Right.
And especially when you're lying that we're negotiating something when they haven't even talked to them.
There's no central
So
core that we can say, well, yes, we have this under control, because there is no central core. It's all over the place now, and
now it is, yes,
we can't
yes.
control that. We can't even. I don't even know what kind of intelligence we have for that right now, because
Well, not only that, how do we coordinate a communication? the way that you avoid this as being part of the job, in fact, part of the main part of the job of the president, is to be the chief diplomat. You don't accomplish diplomacy through deals. You accomplish diplomacy through what is the most important component of any interpersonal relationship, no matter how close, no matter how far. One word:
Honest, but
trust.
honesty and trust. Yeah, there we go. Like close?
The
Trust.
this person that is leading this campaign has proven over and over again that they cannot be trusted. They're a pathological liar. They have betrayed everybody in the of significance in their inner circle. Cheated on all of his wives.
Right. I mean, how much more
Stiffed
could he
all
prove it? How much more did
stiff
he have to do?
stiffed all of his subcontractors when he owned casinos. He never paid the people that did all the support work for the and still bankrupted a casino. How do you bankrupt a casino if you know what you're doing? If you're a good business person, you're not even given a license to run a casino for the Trump Hotel that's in Las Vegas because of your historical record has taught the government officials that grant the licenses there that no, we will not let you operate a casino here.
It's amateur hour in the federal government, and this is we're talking about the lives of our fellow humans. I mean,
The problem is we're dealing with the lives of our people, our country, the lives of the military members that are in harm's way.
from a man who absolutely has not only no clue, but actively made sure that he had nothing to do with this as a younger man by getting out of it, which is obviously neither here nor there. But then to be arrogant enough to come in and say, "But your children, our babies, can go, and our loved ones, and our fathers and
Well,
dad."
that goes into another thing. They're talking about a deferment for Barron based on his height. Well,
Oh, is that what we're doing based on his height? Ah,
well,
didn't
they're
hear that.
trying to do that, but that argument falls through the floor quickly because David Robinson, whose nickname was the Admiral, went through the Naval Academy. He was 7 feet tall and went on to a successful NBA career with the San Antonio Spurs. He was 7 feet tall.
So his height is going to stop him from having to.
So obviously, height was not a factor for him.
It's
Why is it a factor for Barron to be a
because
deferment? There are so many layers and so many factors that
yeah,
come into play here that have not been properly considered and factored into what the current administration is doing to try and navigate through and negotiate through this thing. There is no negotiation. There's no trust. There's no negotiating team. How does it? Not only that, if they were allegedly in a negotiation and all of a sudden started bombing just because Netanyahu got a
it's
thorn
like
in his paw that said,
way to put it.
I want to wipe these guys out, which is his point of view. He found a non deep thinker with a lot of power in their military
Put him on a leash,
to,
and that's right. I
to
mean,
cozy up with him to try and accomplish his goals, but those were not in perfect alignment with what the
that's
USA's goals should
that's
have
for
been.
our nation, and I hate to even add this right on top, but I mean, this is all coming from a nation whose history has has shown that they have repeated the crimes against humanity that were done to them as a people to a whole other group of humans, and the world watched and allowed it. And now this leader Netanyahu has a grip on our very easily influenced, because he's not educated and he's not a deep thinker. And he
Well,
pushed
Netanyahu has a very
great.
questionable past with regard to he has been accused of committing certain crimes
Oh,
and
absolutely,
misdemeanors as well
absolutely,
within his government and organization.
no, absolutely.
So
I mean, we got two
another person that does not necessarily have a moral compass or a high integrity
two
score.
bad guys with one heck of a lot of power, and it's not a good good look any way we view it. Well, I can't thank you enough for your insight and your views and your expertise. I'm going to have to talk to you again because we have barely touched the surface, unfortunately. But you have given us a lot to think about. And so I cannot thank you enough